Imagine a world where the very path to saving lives began in the desecration of the dead. A dark pact where the progress of medicine was whispered from the grave. Welcome to Echoes of Time, your portal to the forgotten pages of history as we unearth a chilling paradox that laid the foundations of modern medicine. Europe's forbidden anatomy trade, where grave robbers became gruesome, unwitting contributors to science. For centuries, the relentless pursuit of understanding the human body, a quest so fundamental to the healing arts, was crippled by an almost insurmountable obstacle: a profound lack of access to human cadavers for dissection. This wasn't merely an inconvenience, it was a deep-seated societal barrier, a wall constructed from the very fabric of belief and law. Religious prohibitions cast a long, unyielding shadow, dictating the sanctity of the human form, often decreeing that the body, once laid to rest, must remain undisturbed, awaiting an afterlife or resurrection. To violate this sanctity was not just a crime, but a sacrilege. Alongside these powerful spiritual doctrines, deeply ingrained societal taboos fostered a widespread aversion to the very idea of dissecting the deceased. The act itself was seen as macabre, unnatural, a disrespect to the dead, and a source of profound unease for the living. To tear open the human vessel was to defile it, an act far removed from the revered status medicine enjoys today. Adding another layer of formidable resistance were the strict legal codes of the era. These laws, often influenced by both religious and societal sentiments, made legitimate procurement of bodies virtually impossible. The penalties for disturbing graves were severe, serving as a stark deterrent to those who might consider such an act. This intricate web of spiritual belief, social custom, and legal enforcement meant that legitimate sources for anatomical study were almost non-existent. In most places, the only legal means to acquire a body for dissection was through the grim harvest of the gallows, the remains of executed criminals. Yet, even this source was woefully inadequate. The number of executed individuals, while a tragic reality, was a mere trickle against the rising tide of scientific ambition. It was a supply utterly incapable of meeting the rapidly burgeoning demand from a new generation of anatomists. These pioneering anatomists, driven by an insatiable hunger for knowledge, were pushing the boundaries of understanding, eager to peel back the layers of mystery surrounding human anatomy and physiology. They understood, with a clarity that few before them possessed, that true medical advancement, foundational surgical techniques, and an understanding of disease could only come from direct observation, from the hands-on exploration of the human form. Without this, their understanding remained theoretical, their surgical practices crude, and their ability to alleviate suffering severely limited. The demand for specimens, therefore, soared, creating an unbearable tension between the dire need for knowledge and the profound scarcity of means. It was into this moral and practical vacuum that a macabre industry began to take root and flourish across Europe, particularly in Britain, where medical schools and eager surgeons were increasingly desperate. This was the birth of the Resurrectionists, or body snatchers. These were individuals who operated in the deepest shadows, driven by financial incentive and fueled by the unquenchable thirst of the medical establishment. Their nightly prowlings through cemeteries became a chilling routine. Under the cover of darkness, aided by simple tools and an intimate knowledge of grave construction, they would unearth the recently deceased. The targets were often fresh graves where the ground was still loose and the memories of the buried still raw. It was a clandestine trade, whispered about in hushed tones, yet openly tolerated, even silently encouraged by those who benefited from its grisly bounty. These unearthed bodies, stolen from their eternal rest, were then clandestinely transported to the burgeoning, albeit illicit, market of medical schools and private dissecting rooms. Here, the eager surgeons and anatomists, hungry for the knowledge that only these specimens could provide, would pay handsomely, turning a blind eye to the origins of their invaluable teaching material. This forbidden anatomy trade, born of desperation and operating outside the bounds of law and morality, became an undeniably critical, if horrifying, engine of discovery. It fueled the understanding of the circulatory system, revealing the intricate pathways of blood through the body. It enabled the pioneering of complex operations, allowing surgeons to practice and refine techniques on real human tissue before applying them to the living. Without access to these cadavers, it is difficult to imagine how such foundational insights could have been gained, how the intricate workings of muscles, bones, nerves, and organs could have been mapped with such precision. The contributions, born from this dark commerce, undeniably helped build the modern medical world we know today, providing the empirical knowledge that underpinned generations of medical advancement. Yet the price was profound, a horrifying human cost, forever intertwining progress with a deep and unsettling ethical darkness. This grisly commerce ignited a fierce and enduring ethical debate, one that continues to echo through the corridors of medical history. Was this an unfortunate but necessary evil? A morally repugnant but ultimately vital phase that propelled medical understanding forward when no other means existed? Many historians and ethicists, looking back at the stark realities of the time, argue forcefully for this perspective. They contend that in an era dominated by pervasive religious and societal prohibitions, with only a minuscule legitimate supply of bodies, the illicit procurement of cadavers was, tragically, the only viable pathway to progress. Without the resurrectionists braving the gallows and public outrage, without the macabre nightly excursions, foundational surgical techniques and anatomical insights, from the understanding of the intricate circulatory system to the ability to pioneer complex life-saving operations, would have been delayed for generations. The argument is simple yet stark. Without this grim enterprise, untold thousands, perhaps millions, would have suffered and died from conditions that would remain mysterious, untreatable, simply because the basic map of the human body was incomplete. The pain of the past, they suggest, was a grim prerequisite for the healing of the present. However, a powerful counter-argument emerges, one that vehemently contends that no scientific gain, however monumental, could ever justify such a blatant disregard for human dignity. This perspective highlights the deep trauma inflicted upon grieving families who, having laid their loved ones to rest, lived in constant fear of their graves being desecrated. The idea that a loved one's final resting place could be violated, their body dug up and sold for profit, inflicted psychological wounds that ran deep and lasted lifetimes. It was a profound violation of trust, a shattering of the sanctity of death itself. Furthermore, this viewpoint critically examines the systemic exploitation of the poor. The graves of the impoverished were often the easiest targets, lacking the robust security of wealthier burial grounds. This created a two-tiered system of death, where the wealthy could afford to protect their deceased, while the poor remained vulnerable, their bodies viewed as commodities, their suffering amplified even in death. This was not merely an ethical dilemma, it was a societal injustice woven into the very fabric of medical advancement. To dismiss this human cost as simply unfortunate is, for many, to ignore the profound and lasting impact on those who were most vulnerable. A third perspective delves deeper, exploring the complex web of societal pressures that ultimately led to this grim reality. It doesn't merely condemn the actions of the resurrectionists or blindly celebrate the medical progress, but instead seeks to understand the broader context. This viewpoint examines how the medical establishment, society at large, and the existing legal frameworks collectively created an environment where such a trade became not just possible, but in many ways inevitable. It highlights the slow, arduous evolution of laws, a testament to society grappling with a profound ethical conundrum that had no easy answers. The horror of the body-snatching epidemic eventually reached such a fever pitch, with public outcry and fear escalating dramatically, that governments were forced to act. This mounting pressure culminated in significant legislative changes, exemplified by Britain's Anatomy Act of 1832. The Anatomy Act was a landmark piece of legislation that sought to directly address the illicit trade by providing a regulated, legitimate supply of cadavers for anatomical study. While the text doesn't explicitly detail the Act's provisions, its stated purpose was clear: to curb the rampant illicit trade by offering an alternative. This meant a shift from a system of clandestine procurement to one where bodies, often unclaimed by relatives, such as those from workhouses, hospitals, or prisons, could be legally allocated for dissection. It was a slow, incremental, and often controversial process, representing society's desperate attempt to balance the urgent need for medical knowledge with the fundamental right to human dignity. The Act, though not without its own criticisms and ethical considerations regarding the origin of the bodies it supplied, ultimately played a crucial role in dismantling the lucrative market for resurrectionists. It aimed to remove the financial incentive for grave robbing by providing a legal, albeit still ethically charged, alternative. This legislative response marked a turning point, signaling a societal recognition that the price of knowledge, when paid in stolen bodies and grieving families, was simply too high. It was a testament to the fact that even in the most desperate of scientific pursuits, ethical boundaries, however slowly, must eventually be established and enforced. The journey from outright prohibition to grudging regulation reveals a profound historical struggle. It underscores the discomforting truth that progress is rarely linear and often comes at a cost we might prefer to forget. This era forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the price of knowledge, not just in monetary terms, but in human suffering, ethical compromise, and the erosion of trust. As we look at the gleaming hospitals, advanced surgical techniques, and sophisticated understanding of the human body that define modern medicine today, it is impossible to ignore the shadows from which so much of this brilliance emerged. The macabre origins of anatomical study, fueled by desperate scientists and illicit entrepreneurs, remain a stark reminder of the lengths humanity has gone in its quest for understanding. It compels us to ask, do the ends always justify the means, especially when those means involve such a profound disregard for human dignity? And what echoes of those forgotten pages of history still whisper warnings about the price we are willing to pay for knowledge, even today, in our ongoing journey of discovery?